Right, so today's guest is Sravana Borkataky-Varma. Is that roughly... Close enough. All right, we'll leave it there. Right, okay. So Sravana is currently a professor at Harvard University, and she's particularly interested and works a lot on Tantra and but the female body in Tantra as well is, I think, a speciality, right? Female iterations of Tantra. Today we're going to talk about Kundalini specifically. I suppose we'll touch on Tantra, I assume, but modern ideas of Kundalini. Kundalini yoga is obviously currently quite in vogue in the West, and Sravana has actually been in the field a great deal, actually studied at source in these practices in their locale, in their tradition in India. So what are the differences between what we're doing in the West and what Kundalini, ideas and iterations of Kundalini, maybe traditionally, let's say, that's a loaded word, but let's say, more more textually. So before going down that path, welcome, Sravana, and you just want to for briefly, because you've been mute so far, you've been completely mute. tell us a little bit how you arrived in the US and your story, your background, because you do have although we talked a little bit before, you do have a really interesting story, and I'd like to just hear a few minutes that story again.
Thank you, first of all, Adam, for inviting me to your wonderful podcast. It's really a beautiful platform to reach out to so many people across the globe. So thank you, first of all. Adam, as I was telling you, and I always laugh, I'm like, what's in my story? But I guess there is a story. Everyone has a story. So I'm going to do it quickly because I don't want to take all the time talking about my story because I'm so tired of telling my own story.
Retell it in a different way.
Retell it in a different way. I wish I was such a wonderful storyteller. I'm not. I'm pretty boring. But anyway, here it is. So from India, my name, as you know, is Sravana Borkataky-Varma. There you go, Adam. Next time, there will be a quiz for you on my name. Yeah. So I'm from Assam, India. Assam is a state in the northeastern part of India. So I was born there, and my family comes from there. We are, we like any other child, born, raised the usual way in an Indian middle-class family. I think what was possibly now when I look back in my 40s, there was this element of my life as a child, which I think was kind of is not normal for everybody. But I did not realize that for the longest period of my time. I had what I have now come to have understood, maybe what would be understood as a clairaudience skills.
No, that's not normal.
It's not,
I think that's
right?
not normal, no. Yeah.
But growing up, I thought that's normal.
Right.
And I think there is some beauty to that. I think there's some beauty to being raised by parents. And I have a wonderful older sister who bullied me like any older sister would. Saying that, I was treated like any other child, which was wonderful and such a blessing. At the same time, I was never ridiculed. I was never asked to not speak what came to me or not think through these things. I was an extremely introverted child. I had like my own little world. Now when I look at some of the kids who say they have a friend who is an invisible friend, I had many invisible friends. Okay, many.
Right.
And that was a blessing to have been raised by parents in school. I don't recall a single point of time in my life where anybody told me, oh, no, that's not what you say, or call me names because I had some of this going on. So one thing led to other while I led a very, what I would call a normal childhood, whatever is normal in today's day and age. My parents also, when I was 8, got me initiated into a temple tradition. This was the tradition in Kamakya. Kamakya is a Shakti Peeth, again in Assam, considered to be a very, very powerful Shakti Peeth. And we may talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, what just for our listenership who might not know about, what's the Shakti Peeth?
So Shakti in this case is goddess, and Peeth is a seat. So it is understood that across the world there are 51 different seats of the goddess that has enormous amounts of power. And so Kamakya is known for its fertility power. It is the yoni of the goddess that fell there, and so it's considered to be very, very powerful when it comes to fertility. Okay. So I was initiated without any fanfare. There is a story where my Baba, that's my dad, who passed away last year. He used to say this story where we went through the initiation, and I was 8. I don't remember anything. And so he said how we came back, and when we were apparently leaving, the priest had asked my father to give me a certain nut and a certain leaf to eat. And he did. He was like, she's too young, I'm not going to give her this. And he went to bed. So apparently, like sometime in the wee hours of the morning, something like 3 o'clock or something, I woke up Baba, and I said, where is the nut? Where is the leaf? And my dad freaked out. He was like, what the hell is happening here? Because there was no way I could have known that was right. That instruction was given to my dad, because it was so little, right? So I think that was the moment when my dad was like,
started taking you seriously. Like, okay,
I don't know how.
Better watch out for this one. Yeah.
Yeah, watch out.
Yeah.
So that was, but that was such a great thing, because I could do nothing wrong, and my sister could do nothing right? So I had the most, glorious teenage years. I was allowed to do anything I wanted.
He was probably petrified of you, wasn't he? You clairvoyant, and telling him that you knew all the instructions. He's probably terrified.
I don't think my dad was terrified of me, or at least that's not what I want to believe. I don't know. No, I wish he was here today. I would have gone back after this podcast and asked him. But he's not. But no, I think it was such a blessing, because I pretty much did anything I wanted to do. I never wanted to study the sciences. And in India, if you were a good student, and if you had what is called as a first class, or a good grades in your high school, you take sciences. And if you were really, really bad, you take humanities.
Really?
And
that's the way it's gone now. What a shame.
Oh my God, yes, always. Because you see, you could only become a lawyer, engineer, or a doctor if you really, or if you could not do anything, then become a teacher. So you can see where I am. But I remember this was, my high school was in New Delhi, and I remember the headmistress called me, and because she had seen my form where I had put in humanities courses for my high school, for my high school concentration. And she's the one, I still remember, beautiful lady. And she was sitting in her headmistress chair on the table, and she said, do what you have to do. Do not listen to the society. Don't listen to people who will say, oh, you took humanities because you're a bad student or you're not intelligent enough. She said, and so, I've always had people like that. Always. It's been my biggest gift in life throughout my entire life. I've always had people who just come into my life and tell me, don't change. Do what you're supposed to do.
Bloody lucky.
Very.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
Very. Adam, I cannot tell you, as I've grown older, how much I've come to appreciate my star alignments and planet alignments.
Yeah.
So anyway, so life went on. I got my what is called as abhishekan, translated as kind of coronation. But when you're going through the Tantra initiation, you go through a series of training. It's kind of like a progressive, what I call it, like elementary school, middle school, high school kind of a deal. I don't know how you want to explain that, but I did. That was around the age just before I turned 15.
As you were going through those, I didn't know that you actually. I thought you had the initiation and you just left it, but you were actually doing stuff all the time. You had You carried on.
I carried on because I did not know anything better. And remember, I thought everybody does it. I thought my sister did it, my cousins did it, my friends did it, because for me it was such a normal thing to do. There was nothing. I know it is very strange, but we have to also remember these were times of no Facebook. These were times of no social media, right? Yeah. So life was, it was almost like I lived in my own world with my own unseen beings, and I projected that in some way to the seen world, right? And so for me, it was like, I didn't even question anything. So I continued on that path. I then wanted to become a nun. And so I went ahead and I started training in the Buddhist space, because that was one space where I thought I could become a nun.
Well, you couldn't do it in the Shakti one that you were in.
I have to tell you a little secret.
Yeah.
So there are gurus, women gurus, as you can, in the Śākta Tantra space.
Yeah.
But I didn't find them cool enough at that time. I was like, okay, they look kind of boring.
Right.
The Buddhist nuns looked more cool. They had like shaved hair.
Right, okay.
Come on, I was 16, okay? And I was not pursuing the usual stuff that kids were pursuing. So I wanted to be the cool nun. So I thought,
fair enough. Yeah. I like the colours, Buddhist colours, nice, reds, ochres. Yeah. What before we go too divergent, what did the training look like then? Because I don't think you've spoken so much about your background. I mean, you mentioned later on in another podcast that I listened to that you had a crisis of faith later on and then I should have joined two and two and thought you had a spiritual practice going on all the time as you were going on your career and doing different things. But what did your spiritual practice kind of look like? And what were you taught from the age 8 till 16? I've never heard you explain that. Yeah.
You've not heard me say
I've not heard that. No.
You've not heard that because I don't think I speak about that in public. It's
you don't have to.
So no, I know, but I'm just going to give a little bit of a glimpse. I know I'm not going to share a lot of my practice, also because I think that's where the sacred private space comes up.
Okay.
But essentially, what I can share, and I have shared this in classrooms, so I don't see why I can't share it in a podcast. So what happens in this is that you're given what is called as a bija mantra, and a seed mantra, and you're given an Ishta Devi or Ishta Deva. And depending on your what I say this, it's kind of like a BFF, like what these days kids call it best friend forever. Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to have a personality match where you don't want to be petrified of your cherished deva. At the same time, you don't want to be madly in love with them. You need to have that kind of an objective balance where you should be able to turn around and tell your Ishta Devi that That's bullshit. Just because you're a goddess doesn't mean you've got it right. So, I think I know this better than you. At the same time, sometimes when you slack, the goddess gives you one tight slap and says, now I'm the goddess, get back on track. Right. So it's kind of a relationship that you cultivate. And I think what happens in this path, and I say this to all the students who have ever spoken to me, and I would love to say this here, is please do not take on a cherished god or a goddess or a guru just because somebody says that one is right for you. It needs to feel right, and we know it. We know when it feels right. The divine blueprint, as I say, is embedded in us. We just have to learn to read it, trust it, and kind of communicate with it. So sorry, go ahead.
I was just kind of intrigued. On the rudimentary level, can you take on any goddess, or is it only certain ones within a certain lineage? Or are you able to take on, obviously it's going to be a goddess, right? So it can't be a male. So that's kind of excluding a whole bunch. It can be a man. Okay, so you can. So even
it can be a man. It can be a third gender. Now here's the answer to your question. Can you take any goddess or any divine being?
Yeah.
Not just any divine beings, right? Now the traditional answer is no. It is assigned from a tradition. My answer is no. We get to choose anyone, because as long as I don't, so I kind of have broken away a little bit from my tradition in terms of how I've come to understand my own practice and the way I kind of teach people. My thing is, the individual gets to define who is sacred. It can be a tree. It can be a plant. It can be an animal. Because animal spirits are as divine and as sacred. And if you look at Hindu mythology, there's always been animals and nature. It can be a river. It can be a god. It can be a goddess. It can be a guru. So I'm saying, where I have kind of slightly shifted from the traditional way of seeing things, is it's BFF. And if it is BFF, I get to cultivate that relationship. Yes, I may begin with, because I have to begin somewhere. So sure, begin within the tradition. A lot of people like to delve with Kali, but we all know there are 12 different forms of Kali. Which form is she you want to engage with? And then as we engage, as we move forward, things will shift internally. And when that shift happens within this body, we will ask more questions. We will seek for more. We will pivot towards more. And it's perfectly fine. It's not like you're cheating. It's not like you've dumped your divine. You're progressing. So, you kind of can have two divine two Ishtadevis or two Ishtadevas at the same time. It's perfectly fine. So that's kind of how I have understood. So going back to your previous question, so how does the practice look like? So the practice is essentially begins with the mantra, and then you're given progressively specific instructions on how to engage with the divine, how to fine tune your phone line communication with the macrocosm. And so there are lots of meditative practices. There are bodily practices, like certain bandhas, the way you breathe a certain way to activate the subtle energy, the subtle body, the subtle energy in the subtle body. So that comes up. There are certain yantra practice, and in the Buddhist world, mandala practices that come up. So what happened was, as I went through life, I kind of have integrated, if you ask me today, integrated Śākta Tantra from Kamakya, Assam, and have integrated Nigma or Vajrayana traditions kind of together. And that is today my practice. And I don't see any conflict whatsoever with that kind of an integration, because it feels right in my heart. It feels right in my physical body. It feels right in my spiritual body. So I don't see why not.
So there's so many kind of paths we can go from here. The Nigma, I assume you learnt in India? I mean, you were quite kind of close to that area of Buddhism, right? And the Tibetan Buddhism up there where you're from, right? But you didn't learn it there, or?
I studied Buddhist studies and I kind of studied more from the Theravada lens. My studies in India back in the 1990s was more on the lens of Theravada and Vinaya and so forth. But I think Nigma kind of came when I started studying, when I became a scholar of Hindu Tantra. I discovered the Nigma tradition, and it made perfect sense, because there were texts, there were commentaries, there were teachers that I could speak to that could explain to me something that was maybe told to me at 8 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old, 15 years old. So the analogy I use here is, I was like the person who is running on a treadmill. And you keep running on a treadmill. You start at 3 miles an hour, then you do 4, then you do 5, then you do 6, then you do 7. But you kind of keep doing it because it becomes a habit. And there is kind of almost like a physical need, a mental need, an adrenal need, whatever, physiological stuff that happens. But at some point, I paused. And my scholarship made me pause. And it's when I paused, I started asking all kinds of questions, and the answers were not in my Kamakya community anymore, because that was a very different world. What I was reading was very different world. So I had to kind of bring two very, very different worlds together and make meaning for myself first in order to be able to teach what I learned.
All right. Well, I definitely want to go on to that and how things changed when you did pause, but let's just quickly speed up then and do like a whistle stop tour through how you got from India, from your school in Delhi to where you are today at Harvard. Right, in five minutes. 5 minutes. You got go. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Via China and banking.
Via China and banking.
Yeah.
I did Buddhism, and then I decided not to don the cloth. And once you decide not to don the cloth, there was this sudden otherness, like, who are you? Then you become nobody, which was a whole different problem. And maybe we can do a whole different conversation on that. But I was that classic meme that you see where a monk goes for an interview and they say, do you have any other skills other than meditation? So I was that person. But then
you didn't give the Buddhist answer. I can sit. What did he say? I can sit. I can read, and I can fast, or something like that. You should have just said that,
right? But that would not give you a job and a paycheck. But essentially, again, right people came to my life at the right time. I got a job where I started my career with a nonprofit and then moved into General Electric. So my first corporate job was at that time called as General Electric International Services, now called as GenPact, I think. And so I started with that. And then I thought that's what I'm going to do with the financial services, and then went to Wipro, which is an IT company, and then Standard Chartered Bank, which is an UK bank. So I kind of thought that's what I'm going to do. I got myself an MBA. I was like, okay, life goes on. And it was wonderful. Honestly, Adam, again, no complaints, very, very blessed. I saw lots of success at a very early age. From there, I moved, my family and we moved to China. It was still the corporate space that took us to China. But it was in China that I realized that that was not necessarily, banking in China was a very different beast. And I did not know what I was doing anymore. So right people came to my life, and I got to teach at DaLian University, which is IT, software, computer engineering university. So I kind of taught there for 2.5 years. From there, we came to the United States.
What were you teaching in the university? You weren't teaching philosophy or Indian religion? No. Okay.
Oh, that is not even allowed.
Actually, that's true.
Yeah, so I was actually working with the students that were graduating. So in DaLian, at that time, this was 2005, DaLian was becoming the next Silicon Valley of China kind of a situation. So there were all these multinational companies that had come there. There was a very steady stream of students that were coming out of Neusoft University and DaLian University. So they were coming out of that. But there was this big skill gap between training, between studying at the university and working with a multinational company. So I was kind of bridging that gap and getting them to understand what it means to study in a multinational company. And also teach English, whatever that again means. So it was wonderful. It was a great break. We then came here to the United States in 2007. And one, because I had to wait for paperwork to happen, and also certain health situations came up, which made me pause. And it was when I paused is when I returned to religion. And that's when my study of religion started at Rice University. That's where I did my PhD. I graduated
Is it Carolina? Rice?
No, Houston.
Houston, Texas. Okay.
Yeah, Rice is at Houston. So I studied. I thought I'd study Buddhism, but then I kind of pivoted and my dissertation is pretty much an autoethnography of sorts. I really had to figure out what was happening to me, what had happened to me, and so I was again very lucky to have been allowed to do a PhD, which is kind of like, go figure out your own life.
Yeah.
So it's like, not bad. So that's where Kundalini came up. My dissertation was on Kundalini yoga, rising in women's bodies today. And
have you been practicing? Sorry. I was going to say, have you been practicing all along during the corporate life? Had you maintained the practice, or was there some kind of? You had.
Totally.
Okay, right.
Oh yeah.
Right. So you're still super into it all the time throughout.
Right. Because I do not know how to exist without it.
Right.
I do not know how to live without my practice. I say my mantra, I don't even know how many thousands of times in a day. It's like I breathe and the mantra goes, right? There's nothing that I do that is outside of that realm. Except for when I'm sleeping, of course, unless I'm engaged with liminal dreaming, that's a different intentional engagement, which I often practice, but that's a different story, right? So I've graduated in 2016. And then I've taught in many universities. So to correct, I'm not a professor at Harvard University. People will come after me by claiming that claim.
No, sorry.
I know. No, that's okay.
Visiting. No, you're a visiting professor, aren't you? Visiting.
Right.
Can you
and
say
now
that?
I'm a visiting lecturer.
Yeah,
now I'm a fellow. It keeps changing. But for the last 3 years, I've been in the Harvard Divinity School. I taught for 6 courses already as the lecturer of Hindu traditions. And I'm going to return in the fall as a fellow in the Center for Study for World Religion. And my parent or my home university is University of Houston. So that's so I'm currently not currently, I've been on leave from University of Houston for a while now, yeah.
Sequestered. Okay.